Hello. Well, the first thing I made on that mill were some T-nuts, because I bought a rotary table at the same time as the mill and a chuck for the rotary table, and the chuck had M6 bolts to fix it to the table, and the slots on the table were much wider, so I had to, a standard T-nut wouldn't do, so I made 3 T-nuts. And then the second thing I thought I'd do is I had a lump of brass lying around, so I thought I'll make a brass hammer so that I can tap workpieces down into the milling vise. I should say that I've never used a mill before in my life, so don't watch these videos to learn how to use a mill. All I know about milling has been learnt by watching A-Bomb, Aid's Workshop or Blondie Hacks. I just do what I think is sensible, which is usually not sensible because I'm just beginning. I managed to blunt my 10mm end mill by trying to cut with it with the spindle in reverse and wondering why it didn't cut. And then I was in a bit of a hurry and I drilled into one of my parallels. I made this stainless steel faceplate for the lock on the door to the workshop because the door is actually very thin. In fact, so thin that I thought that by mortising the lock I was going to collapse. So I thought I'll strengthen it a bit with that. Very trivial job with a milling machine. I bought this Beech replacement hammer handle off eBay for £2.73 postage free. How can they possibly make a profit out of that? Anyway, it's a bargain for me. Well, I faced it off and put it in the vise this way round because the parallels are not narrow enough. If I put it the other way round, I'd be milling into the parallels. So we've got this is the end of the hammer, and I'm going to kind of freehand make this slot, starting with a 14mm 2-flute mill. One of the problems with the way I set this thing up with the vise in the middle of this rather long table is that for milling the slot for this hammer handle, I actually wanted to move the X and Y axes at the same time. Because I've got a power drive on the X axis, this handle is sprung loaded to detach itself when you let go of it. So to use it, you have to press in continuously. These two things are quite a long way apart, so I found that quite awkward to do when I was manually trying to steer around an oval curve. Possibly the sensible thing to do would be to move the vise up here for those purposes and then move the table further down. But I didn't think to do that. Just plunge right the way through this. I started off plunge milling, feeding it gently using the fine feed on the quill, but I soon got bored with that. doesn't like side milling like this, partly because the tool is too deep in the workpiece and the top edge of the tool is not really cutting, because it's I'm just pushing it on the shaft, I think. I'm moving the table slowly to the left, but it doesn't like that much either. It might have been better had I chomped it downwards from the top in little slices. Well, let's see where we are. Just a smidgen wider needed, or maybe not. Maybe that's getting. I can just hammer that in. Yeah, that's all right. Except I wanted it to go right the way through. I wanted it to go right the way through, and in fact, I only managed to get it to go 80% through, because this mill is not long enough. I don't think I've got a solution to that. Well, I'm thinking that this foreflute may be very slightly longer. Through. Well, it goes in there until a certain, actually it goes better that way, it goes in there until a certain point where it gets stopped on a ledge. There's just a little ledge in there because I freehanded the bottom separately from freehanding the top, because the mill wasn't long enough to do it all at once, so I've got a slight ledge there. I might just finish that off with a file, I think, rather than putting it back in the mill. Well, I just found it a very little bit, and it now goes in as I expected. It's not absolutely perfect, but it's as near as damn it, is what I would say. Well, of course, I cut a bit off this, partly because it wouldn't fit in the vise, and partly because I didn't actually want it to be too enormous and too heavy. But there are two side effects of that. One is that now the handle looks, to my eyes, to be slightly oversized for the head, just aesthetically speaking. The other thing is that I want to turn the OD of this just to clean it up. And it would have been easier had I left that bit on, because I could then grip this in the chuck and turn the whole thing in one piece, whereas now I'm going to have to turn half of it and turn it round, which won't produce such a good result. But anyway, there you go. Well, I'm just going to touch off and then put the tool in as a time demands. If I put that in by 2 thou, will that be enough to clean it up? Bloody hell. I've got the tapping gears in. What a nuisance. It takes half an hour to change these bloody gears. Right, I've changed the gears back. So this is 3 thou. Never sounds good, those gears, do they? See what happens. We shall get to an interrupted cut in a minute. Right here. Not much. I think a little emery cloth. Right. So,
I decided to chamfer one end of the hammer using an ordinary 45-degree chamfer tool, but it didn't go at all well.
excuse me. This is tight. You bastard. It's because, oh yes, it just moves. Yeah, well, we'll just have to put up with that, won't we? I hate doing things like this. I should have done all this before. And I've marred that, you see. And we've got a horrid thing there. And this isn't, there's not much rake on this chamfer tool, you know. Well, I've put the left-hand cutting tool in and put the top slide at 45 degrees. I'm not too hopeful about this, however, because it's quite a long way off, and that's horribly loose, because it's nearly off the slide, the dovetail. And yeah, that's just basically how the thing. Maybe I can do it like this. Maybe I can. Right. Yes, I can come back a long way here and then go forward on this one. And go to the left. This will be better. This will definitely be better. We've got rid of all the dents. What that's going to have to do. So, we got rid of all the dents, right? Now, what I was going to do was try and make this one rounded. But that's a hell of a lot of stuff to take off to do that. What I was thinking of doing is using a parting off tool to take stepped cuts like that and then use a file afterwards just to round it off. But parting off tools on this lathe are death. At least this one is not raked much, which is good for brass. And my other ones, this one, for example, has got an enormous rake on it, just digs in and does a disaster. Now, perhaps I could use this, which is a trepanning tool or groove cutting tool which I made, but it has no rake, no top rake, so maybe it will be okay. So I put that tool in there. It's very slightly above centre height. And the top side is locked. See, I dare not push too hard for fear of the thing flying out of the chuck as it usually does. But don't like it. Really don't like it. I don't think this tool is very sharp. Well, I decided to go back to the technique I use for chamfering this because it's about the only thing that works. So that is the brass bit finished with one flat face and one rounded one, not quite hemispherical. It fits on the handle well, and what I need to do is to cut this piece of wood off and jam a wedge in there to make it permanent. I actually have a separate bucket for aluminium swarf and a separate one for brass and bronze swarf, because it goes against the grain to throw it all away or mix it up with mild steel. But whether anybody will ever want it, such tiny quantities, is another question. But I just can't bring myself to not do it. So we spent 10 minutes cleaning the lathe up. Well, I've stained and varnished this handle, so all I have to do now is push this head on. I think what I'll do is put a little bit of wood glue on here just to fill out any areas where it isn't quite matching. That's it. Right, so that's it. I had a nice wedge that I've made. What have I done with it? Here we are. My theory is, if I knock this in, not quite sure where it's going to go. We'll try that. We'll just have to use this. That's all right. I should have put some glue on that, shouldn't I? Forgot to do that. Well, that's the finished hammer with one flat face and one rounded one. I think it's okay. It'll do what I want, which is just to tap items into the milling vise.